Okay, this is example 4, and we're again still in section 8-3. On this particular example, they want you now to find the angle measure. Before we were finding a side length for the other 3 examples. Now they want you to find what the angle degree is going to be. So when you're finding an angle, you have to use the inverse operations, which the inverse operations would be sine to the -1, cosine to the -1, or tangent to the -1. Those are your inverse operations. You will use those to help you find an angle degree. And so in this particular problem, and again, I still have my sine, cosine, tangent, SOHCAHTOA up there to help remind me of which one is which. And in this case then, when I go to my diagram, this would be the opposite. And here is the hypotenuse. We are not dealing with the hypotenuse, so that means this would have to be the adjacent. So since we are not using the hypotenuse, then I know we are dealing with tangent. And so our setup, tangent, and again, would be x degrees. The angle always goes over here. And so this would be the angle x degrees, equals then, and this would be the ratio. And so this would be opposite. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So the opposite is 8.6 over 11. And so tangent of angle x degrees equals 8.6 over 11. There's my setup. Now, here's where we get into using the inverse. In order to get the angle x by itself, so I want angle x degree over here by itself. To get that by itself, I would have to divide by tangent. Well, when you're dividing by tangent, that means that would be the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. And so that means that's where when we divide then, we end up, the tangent then becomes the inverse, tangent of -1. And then times then your 8.6 over 11. And so that's where the -1, the inverse, comes in, because you have to get tangent to the other side. We're solving for the x, the angle degree. And so when you divide by that tangent, that makes it then to be tangent to the -1. Now you're going to use your calculator. And on your calculator, you will see where you had the 3 buttons where it said sine, cosine, and tangent. Above those buttons, in between the buttons on your calculators, you'd see right above sine, you see sine to the -1. And then right above the cosine button, you have cosine to the -1. And then right above the tangent button, you have tangent to the -1. Now, to get to those buttons on my calculator, I have to hit the second button. Or sometimes they'll have a shift button up there. They call it shift, or in this case, on mine, it is the second button. So you hit the second button, and then I hit tangent, and it brings up tangent to the -1. And then it's got a parenthesis. I would hit 8.6 divided by 11, and then in parenthesis, and then I could hit equal or enter, and I end up with my answer, which that means, and then I should have an M on there, measure of angle x degrees equals 38.0189, and they're going to want us to go to the nearest degree on this. So the measure of angle x is going to equal then 38 degrees. And so we found our angle to be 38 degrees. So anytime you are dealing with finding an angle measure, you're going to have to use your sine to the -1, cosine -1, or tangent to -1, which are your inverses. You will do the setup like we regularly do, where you have the tangent or the sine or the cosine of the angle. And then because we have to divide that to the other side, now it makes it, we have to use the inverse. And so that's like multiplying by the reciprocal. So now then, when we use our calculator, we will have to hit that shift or second button to get to either sine to the -1, cosine to -1, or tangent to -1. And then you just punch in your 8.6 divided by 11, and you get your angle degree. So anytime you're dealing with finding an angle, you're going to use the inverses to find those.